He is the biggest liar I ever encountered.
I haven't much smoke. My wife fell back there in the tub.
The following video contains graphic and disturbing content which may be upsetting for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Craig felt a surge of excitement as he entered Delilah's den, a haven of adult fun and pleasure. He pulled out his Amex and purchased a bunch of Delilah dollars to tip the dancers. His eyes swept over the stage, looking for her. He saw her in the corner, glowing in the warm light. Summer had gorgeous long blonde hair, stunning blue eyes, and a smile that could melt ice. She was the reason Craig came to this place nearly every night. Summer approached him seductively and planted a kiss on his cheek. She danced in front of him, swaying her hips and flipping her hair. She leaned in close and whispered in his ear, inviting him to join her in the champagne room. He nodded eagerly, feeling a rush of anticipation. He followed her as she led him by the hand, away from the crowd and into the more intimate setting. He relaxed, sinking into a comfortable leather chair, and Summer began to dance for him, moving with grace and charm. The music was upbeat and lively, and Craig was captivated by her performance. He let go of the money worries that had been haunting his life. It was strange. He was using the cause of his problems as his refuge. Summer made him feel valued, like he was her one and only, a rare escape from the harsh reality outside the club. At Delilah's, he wasn't a husband or a new father. He was a high roller. After the dance, they moved to a table. Craig ordered a cocktail while Summer sat next to him and talked to him softly. She asked him about his hobbies and his dreams and listened attentively to his answers. She smiled and laughed at his jokes and touched his arm gently. She made him feel like he was the only person in the room and that she cared about him. She shared some details about her personal life, but never too much. She told him she was a single mother of a 5-year-old little boy, that she worked hard to support him and give him a good life. Craig said he wanted to help her. He didn't realize that she was just doing her job, or maybe he did. It didn't matter, thought Summer. He was a paying customer, and he never pressured her for anything more than dances and conversation. And he wasn't even her best customer, just one of many. Stephanie cuddled their new baby, feeling a mix of joy and worry. She loved being a mom, but she also missed her work as a lawyer. She had to go back to the office 3 days a week soon, and she wondered how her and Craig would manage. They had bought a beautiful home in Philadelphia's Main Line area, 526 Winding Way. It was their dream house, and they had worked hard to afford it. It was a great place to live and raise a family. Stephanie trusted Craig to take care of their finances, and she never questioned his frequent business trips. He was a faithful husband and a great father, and she was happy with their life. Craig and Stephanie had a group of friends who were very close. They did everything together, like playing poker, going out to dinner, or having parties at each other's houses. Craig was always willing to help anyone in the group, since he didn't have a typical office job. He was flexible and generous, and everyone liked him. So when Craig needed a loan for his business, they didn't have a problem helping him out. They trusted him to pay them back, and they wanted to support his latex glove venture. Craig told them he had a big New York client who was connected to both retailers and manufacturing in China. He said he needed a loan for his business, but it was more of an investment, really. He'd use the loan to buy latex gloves in bulk, and once he sold them for a huge profit, he'd pay them back with interest. He asked that they not tell Stephanie because he wanted Stephanie to be impressed by his success in business. But in reality, he had no deal, only fake invoices. He was borrowing from one friend to pay another and hoping they wouldn't find out. He was playing a dangerous game, and he was running out of time. Craig's addiction to Summer was costing him more than he could afford. He wanted to keep her happy and impressed by his wealth. He showered her with gifts, flowers, jewelry, and even new furniture for her apartment. He told her he was an affluent businessman and that he had a big deal coming up. He didn't tell her that he was lying to his friends and his wife and that he was in deep trouble. He needed a large amount of cash to cover his tracks and prevent his scheme from being exposed. He needed it fast, and he thought he knew where to get it. He opened his ledger where he kept track of everything and looked at the long list of names, dates, and amounts. At the top, he wrote FC 1 million and PM 500,000. He picked up the phone and called First Colony. "I'd like to talk to someone about life insurance policies," he said. Stephanie stopped by the pharmacy on her way home from work. She had a prescription for Ambien, a sleeping pill that the doctor had recommended. She and Craig had been struggling with insomnia for a while. She thought it was because of the stress of being new parents. Their daughter, Haley, was only 9 months old, and she demanded a lot of attention. Stephanie loved her daughter more than anything, but she was tired. She hoped the sleeping pills would help them get some rest. That night, Craig and Stephanie were in bed. They had just taken the Ambien, hoping to get some sleep. Craig turned to Stephanie and told her he had something important to share with her. He told her that he had taken out 2 life insurance policies, and he had made her the beneficiary of both. He urged her to do the same for him, explaining that he wanted to make sure that if anything happened to either of them, Haley would be taken care of. He said he wanted to safeguard their future. Stephanie smiled and thanked him. She told him he was a wonderful husband and father and that she loved him very much. He gave her the phone numbers for First Colony and Prudential Mutual, and she promised to call them the next day. She kissed him goodnight and closed her eyes. On April 29, 1997, Craig and Stephanie had dinner with Stephanie's parents at a Thai restaurant. They had a pleasant evening, chatting about this and that. Steph's mother, Anne, wanted to talk to Craig about Steph's 30th birthday, which was coming up in June. When Stephanie excused herself to go to the restroom, Anne asked Craig for help planning a surprise party for Stephanie. She said she wanted to make it special since it was a milestone birthday. Craig agreed to help and said he had some ideas. When Craig and Stephanie arrived back at their house, they put the baby to bed, and Craig suggested they have a beer to wind down. He said he had bought a new brand of beer that he wanted to try. He went into the kitchen and came back out with 2 glasses, handing one to her. "Cheers," he said, clinking his glass to hers. "Police!" "Up here," Craig called. The officer had beaten the paramedics to the house. He rushed to the upstairs bathroom, where he found a woman in the tub, her skin blue. He told Craig to assist him in getting the woman out of the tub. They lifted her out of the water and laid her on the floor. The officer performed CPR on her, trying to revive her. He checked for a pulse, but there was none. He continued to pump her chest and breathe into her mouth, hoping for a miracle. The paramedics arrived a few minutes later. They quickly loaded her onto a stretcher and rushed her to the ambulance. They drove away with sirens blaring. All the commotion had woken the baby. Haley started to cry in her crib, wondering where her parents were. Neighbors heard the sirens and came over. They saw Craig on the floor, surrounded by police officers. They asked him what had happened, and he told them his wife had an accident. He said the paramedics had taken her to the hospital, but he didn't know if she was going to make it. The neighbors immediately offered to take the baby so he could go to the hospital. He was about to go change out of his wet clothes when an officer stopped him. The officer said he needed some basic information from Craig and that it wouldn't take long. He took out his pad and pen. Craig answered the questions, trying his best to remain calm. The officer took down their names and then asked Craig what had happened. Craig told him that Stephanie had gone to take a bath after they put the baby to bed. He was watching the hockey game in the bedroom. He heard a thump, but he thought it was the shampoo bottle falling. It was always falling from the shower corner, so he didn't think much of it. But after a little more time had passed, he thought that she had been in there for a long time and called out to her. She didn't answer. Worried, he went in to check on her. He found her in the tub, her head under water. He broke down in tears and said that he loved her more than anything. He didn't understand how this could have happened. The officer thanked him and told him he'd better go to the hospital now. Craig left for the hospital, leaving the officer alone in the house. The officer started to examine the scene, looking for any clues or evidence. He jotted down a few things while they were fresh in his mind. He noticed that the floor had been dry before he and Craig pulled Stephanie from the tub. If she had drowned, there should have been some water splashed around. He also noticed that she was wearing a watch and bracelets in addition to her wedding ring. That was odd, he thought. Most women would take off their jewelry before taking a bath. He wondered if Craig had told him the truth, or if there was something more to this case. He decided to investigate further and called for backup. He had a feeling that this was not a simple accident. A detective picked up the phone. The officer told him that a young woman had been found unresponsive in her bathtub. The detective agreed to check it out and drove to the house. Craig had already left for the hospital, where he was calling everyone he knew and telling them that Stephanie had suffered an accident and that she might not survive. His friends and family were shocked and scared, and they hurried to the hospital to support him. The detective searched the house, but nothing seemed out of place. He decided to talk to Craig and find out what happened. He left for the hospital, but before he arrived, the doctors told Craig that Stephanie was gone. The detective approached Craig and offered his condolences. He said he was sorry for his loss, but he needed to ask Craig some questions. He said it was standard procedure in all accidental death cases to get a formal statement from the closest relative. Craig nodded and agreed to cooperate. He had nothing to hide, and he loved his wife more than anything. Stephanie's parents, who had arrived at the hospital, were inconsolable. They wanted to take their daughter's body and arrange for an immediate funeral. They were devoutly Jewish and followed the custom of burying their dead within 24 hours. They also wanted to start the healing process, a week-long ritual called sitting Shiva. They were not happy when the police told them that they wanted to perform an autopsy on Stephanie. Stephanie's body was on the autopsy table 10 hours after she was pronounced dead. The funeral home was urging the pathologist to hurry up and release the body, so he planned to do a cursory exam, and if nothing looked suspicious, they could proceed with the burial. But he spotted something that made him pause. He saw petechiae, small red dots around the eyes. They indicated that she had been strangled. He prepared his tools for a thorough autopsy and called the detective to tell him to come over.
But as the blood drains away from those sites of injury, leaving the surrounding skin quite pale, then the area of bruising stands up like a beacon in the night.
When he finished, he told the detective what he had discovered. He pointed to the bruising on her neck. He said it was obvious that she had been choked to death. They were dealing with a homicide. The police had a warrant to search the house, but they didn't want to alert Craig that he was under suspicion. They decided to make him give his formal statement first and trap him in his version of what happened before he could lawyer up. Craig's two friends found out that he was giving a statement, and as lawyers themselves, they knew it was odd. Neither of them were criminal lawyers, but they knew enough to realize that this wasn't normal. To ask someone who had just lost their wife to come into the police station and give a statement wasn't standard, so they rushed down to the station to support their friend. When Craig was done with his statement, his friends were let in. Then the police hit Craig with the news. They told him that they knew Stephanie was strangled. His friend told him right away not to say anything more. The family was sitting Shiva and hoping for the funeral to happen soon. But the police had to search the house. They advised Craig to clear everyone out during the process, but he ignored them. The cops arrived, Craig shut himself in his bedroom, and his two friends didn't say anything about the autopsy results or why the police were searching. The family and friends were shocked and puzzled. They didn't understand what was happening. The cops took papers and checkbooks, anything that looked to be business-related. They were still waiting for a toxicology report, so they looked for pill bottles or anything else suspicious. They found a book called How We Die that explains what happens to the human body after death. They thought it was odd and creepy, so they seized the book as evidence and continued their search. They hoped to find something that would link Craig to the murder. Craig eventually shared the autopsy results with everyone and said that he was being set up. In their grief, they didn't question Craig. He was everyone's best friend, and he and Stephanie had a perfect marriage. They thought it was a horrible error and that the police were mistaken. They believed Craig and stood by him. Stephanie's homicide case soon caught the attention of the media, who tried to get a statement from Craig. He declined to comment and avoided family and friends. His friends grew concerned. He was acting nervous and angry. Some doubts about his involvement started to creep in. Craig confessed to his lawyer friends that he had a bag with $20,000 ready and that he wanted to flee the city. He said he couldn't handle the stress and that he would leave his daughter with his parents. They stayed quiet at first, but would eventually report this conversation to the police several days later. The murder of his wife made Craig a suspect, and the police had enough to arrest him. They confirmed that Stephanie died from manual strangulation, and there was no evidence of forced entry at their home. They also discovered that Craig had a large life insurance policy on Stephanie, which gave him a reason to kill her. They planned to arrest him right after the funeral, which was set for the next day. They didn't know Craig was thinking of escaping at that time. Craig hired the best defense attorneys he could find, hoping to get out of a murder charge. The prosecution, however, was not convinced. They were a little worried about the lack of physical evidence, so they kept digging for more information. They had learned from Craig's friends that he wanted to skip town and about the bag with money ready. They also received an anonymous tip that Craig was a frequent customer of Delilah's Den, a strip club, and that he had a thing with one of the dancers. They also found out that the life insurance policy on Stephanie was taken out only 3 weeks before she died. These facts made Craig look more guilty, and the prosecution prepared to use them in court. Delilah's Den was the next stop for the detectives. They wanted to know more about Craig's activities there. They talked to the staff and the dancers, who told them Craig was a big spender, buying lots of Delilah dollars and frequently visiting the champagne room. He would shell out $300 to $1,000 every time he came, not counting food and drinks. He also liked to buy $200 bottles of champagne, which he drank with his preferred dancer, Summer. The detectives learned that Craig had blown $59,000 at the club in the last 9 months, a lot of money for someone who said he was a struggling businessman. They also found out that Craig had borrowed money against his house and that his business dealings were vague. The detectives went to talk to Summer. They asked her about her relationship with Craig, and she admitted that he bought her gifts and gave her money outside the club. She denied that they had ever had sex or that they were in love. She told the cops that this was all business and that she was just doing her job. She said that keeping customers on the edge of their personal lives was a common tactic that dancers used to make more money. She knew he was married, and he said he loved his wife, but that he wasn't in love with her. When he told her that his wife had died, she felt terrible and started to cry, and that was the last time she saw him. The police also found out that Craig had a history of using escort services. 4 years prior, he had been arrested for soliciting a prostitute, but he had testified against the owner of the service in exchange for immunity. His arrest had been kept secret, so no one ever found out about it. The police decided to search Craig's house again, hoping to find more evidence. They found thousands of dollars in cash in Craig's dresser, which he had probably planned to use for his escape. They also noticed a closet door that led to the attic. They opened it and climbed up, and they were shocked by what they saw. They found pawn shop slips showing that Craig had hocked his wife's jewelry several times to fund his obsession with Summer. They found Delilah dollars and receipts for all the expensive items that Summer had mentioned. They also found the ledger that detailed Craig's business transactions, which revealed he was involved in a Ponzi scheme. He had been scamming his friends and family and spending the money on his lavish lifestyle. The police realized that they had found the smoking gun and that Craig was not only a murderer, but also a fraudster. The toxicology report finally came back, and it confirmed the police's suspicion. Stephanie had Ambien in her system, and the amount was 3 times the normal prescribed dose. The medical examiner formulated his expert opinion based on this finding. He believed that Craig drugged Stephanie and put her into the bathtub, forgetting to remove her jewelry. The water likely revived her, and she started to struggle. Craig then strangled her to death. This was a brutal and cold-blooded murder, and the police had enough evidence to prove it in court. Craig was locked up in jail until the trial, as he was denied bail. He pleaded not guilty to the murder charge and to the fraud charges for his Ponzi scheme. The defense tried to argue for separate trials, but the judge rejected their request. On October 30th, 1997, the trial was ready to start. Craig suddenly changed his mind and pleaded guilty. He broke down in tears as he admitted to killing his wife, stealing from his friends and clients, and running a deceptive business. He said he wanted to spare his family the pain of a trial. He was automatically sentenced to life in prison without parole. There was another strange twist when Craig told the judge that he had been visited by the ghosts of Stephanie, his father-in-law, and his dad. He claimed that the spirits had told him to plead guilty. He made a final statement before the court. He said, quote, "My life had become such a sham and a fake and a fraud, and the hole that I had been digging for myself became so deep, and it became deeper and deeper. Right became wrong, and wrong became right. My life was on a slippery slope. There were no excuses. I offer none." End quote. Do you think he pleaded guilty because of what the spirits told him, or for more selfish reasons? Let me know in the comments. As always, you can get more involved by subscribing and discussing the cases in the comments. I try to reply to as many as I can. Continue watching the next video and we can explore another story hidden within the wrinkles in crime.